A little bit about the people involved today. I'd like to introduce Mac Ball. Mac Ball is in the back. He's with Goosehead Insurance. He's a sponsor today. If you need a fantastic insurance agent, Mac is wonderful. I tell you, I get so many deals, and we know every deal's got challenges these days. You know, whether it's high debt to income or first-time home buyers, man, I can pick up the phone and text Mac or call him and get cheap, reasonable rates for my clients. And sometimes that means a deal working or a deal not, a $10 difference in an insurance premium. It really does. So Mac is awesome. I highly encourage you to scan his QR code, get to know Mac, because he's a valuable resource for us. As far as who's presenting today, I've got Steve Barker here. Steve is the CEO of Karis Management. Karis Management is a partner to Movement Mortgage. They order and take care of all our appraisals, and they also give a portion back to Movement Foundation, which goes to the schools. It goes to grants that we provide to nonprofits in the area, and they are a valuable part of our team. And we also have the Dream Team, United, with Keller Williams, Shannon Cole, and Mike Morrell. They're here today to talk about CMAs. They're experts. So I hope you guys find value in this today, and I really appreciate you all coming, and hope you enjoy the class today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm sorry, but I'm not using the microphone. If you can't hear me, you're in trouble. Sales price, this home, San Francisco, California.
$3 million.
2.3 mil.
3 mil? What'd you say?
I said 2.3 mil.
2.3 on the money. On the money. It's either that or 3.2.
12.3.
Now it is. That was the last time it's sold. We've done this part with the exception of introducing Molly Taylor. Molly Taylor is a certified appraiser. Molly works for Karis. Has anybody in here ever had a property come in below value? None of us. Has anybody ever contested or done a rebuttal? Okay, this is the person that reviews that should the lender decide that the rebuttal is valid. And we're going to talk about rebuttals. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. Let me tell you what you're going to chat about. But let me just share with you, if you came here today to know what the Webster Dictionary version of definition of an appraisal is, there it is. Take a picture. You can get it from him, because I'm moving on. There's the 10 sections of an appraisal. If you want to get it from him, because I'm moving on. Because that's boring. What we're about here today is specific to your market. I want to hang out for a little bit for your CMA class, because I want to see how you and her compare notes on doing the CMA. So let's talk about what you're going to learn in the next 60 to 90 minutes. I promise you that you will learn some pricing strategies so that you don't ever have to deal with a rebuttal. And some tips around not having to deal with a rebuttal. If you get into a rebuttal, we're going to tell you how to have success with it. All you people raise your hands. How many of you, when you did the rebuttal, did they raise the value? Did they come back with a different value? Well, see? The one that's going to teach. Preach. Don't preach. There's some common misconceptions about an appraisal and appraisers. We're going to clarify some of those things up. And then at one point, I'm going to certify all of you as appraisers. And you are going to tell me what conditions you would put on the appraisal based upon pictures you'll see up here. So if you need to move forward, feel free to do that now. And then last and most importantly, this is about you. This is about a discussion. This is about questions that you may or may not have throughout the day. So let's just dive in. We're going to get Molly talking because I'll give you a little bit. So I'm going to give you the Karis speech. It's the elevator one. It's the 30-second job. I used to work for Movement. I worked here for 11 years. I worked for a Wells Fargo joint venture as a loan officer for 18 years. I worked at a small bank in Washington, D.C. And before that, yes, I'm that old, in the 80s, I sold real estate. So I was a licensed real estate professional. I've been in this role for almost 2 years now, and I'll tell you when I came here 2 years ago what I knew about an appraisal. Flip to page 2, go to the bottom, what's the value, are there conditions? That's what I knew. There's so much more to it. So Molly's an appraiser. I don't know if this thing goes up or not. But before I turn it over to her to talk about comps, what is the best comp you have out there? Say it louder. The house next door. Ideally, yeah, absolutely, sure. But what is the best comp there is? You're licensed real estate professionals.
Close.
Close. Proximity, yep.
No, close.
Closed most recently. And we're going to talk about that too. But you're licensed real estate professionals. That's what you get paid to do. What's your best comp? How about one that supports your value? That's the best comp to you. Let me know that this one, I don't care if it's 800 years older, 75 miles away, it's the best comp because it's the same price. Not the best comp. Let's let Molly talk a little bit about, well, I'll lead it into you. This subdivision, Molly, same houses. Nothing in this neighborhood has sold in the last 2 years. This is our subject property. Where do you go? What do you look for?
You would expand your radius or your distance that you're looking for, and then set your parameters based on what you see as the value add within the property. So if if the buyers in this area are looking at the quality of construction, are they looking at the amount of space they're getting, exterior features, super decked out patios, so on and so forth. Keep that in the back of your mind, and then you start looking. You want to know the age of the, want to look for similarities in age, condition, quality, so on and so forth. Just slowly expand until you can get them. Ideally, you want them, yesterday, having closed yesterday. So that's sort of the thing. And the rule of thumb we look for are comparable sales that once you put them in there, they bracket each of the features that you're looking at. So if it's a 3-bedroom, it's, if you only have 4 bedrooms across the line as comparables, it's not really the sales comparison approach, or you can't say that you're using match pair analysis if you don't put it one that's on the other end, or 3-bedroom.
What if this property here has an elevator? Do you have to go find a property that has an elevator? How do you know what the value is in that elevator?
Well, ideally, yes. You would expand your search and try and find a property with an elevator. And, in all likelihood, well, not in all likely, it does not necessarily compare with your subject if it's 2 miles away. So you have to look and see what does the elevator add to, if you find it a mile away, what does the next door house to that elevator house sell for without an elevator? So you kind of have to extract from the market, is the term we use. So if that neighborhood adds 5,000 to it, then you can extrapolate a percentage adjustment, or starts to get you in the realm of where does your adjustment come from and why is it applied and how does it affect the value.
What's the minimum number of comps that have to be on every appraisal? 3. Excellent. You got that one. Now let's go with the hard one. What's the maximum number of comps you're allowed to have on an appraisal? 6, 8, 7, 9, 10, 5. Think Buzz Lightyear.
Infinity.
There is no maximum number of comps in appraiser. That's mine. I already scratched it off anyway. There is no maximum number of comps to use. Now, I will tell you the most comps I've got, well, let's ask you in a second, but the most comps I've ever seen is 10. It was Goat Farm on 20 acres. I mean, it was a very unique property. What's the most comps you've ever used on an appraisal?
I have probably used 9. And again, a unique property, out of the middle of nowhere with several features that I felt like added value, or did it add value that I needed to prove one way or another.
Can you put a property for sale on an appraisal?
Yes.
Where does it have to go?
Well, it shouldn't be given primary value, but it oftentimes they want to see something supporting, what am I trying to say? Yeah, the competition within the market. So usually they're either put at the end of the grid or in a separate page under, listing, actives, pending. But if you have a changing market, for instance, and you want to support that, this is the direction they're going in, and this comes just like the subject, and it's been listed for, it just went on the market. That shows that you're in the ballpark of where you're supposed to be going. Now, if you put in an active listing that's been on the market for 200 days and it hasn't sold, then what does that tell you?
Price or condition?
Well, so the price of that is marked too high. So then you take a step back and then that also gives you some information about where to price the property and what is the value.
We're about what? 2 miles from the North Carolina line? Is that where we are? And you got a house, like here's the line. You have to stay in the state or the county that the subject property is located in?
Ideally, that would be nice, but as always, we haven't done the whole hearing. It depends.
So every question you're going to ask today, there's 2 answers to. One, it depends. And the other one is, the market bears it.
Yeah.
So it's what the market bears.
So, yes. Oftentimes, as you find probably in each of your positions, it doesn't always turn out to be the perfect answer to everything. But if you do go in and you can't find a sale that brackets it, and you do have to expand your search, that's allowable. That's allowable as long as you have a reason for it and explain it and make sure that you understand what that distance or different county or different states, what the adjustment is. Is it higher taxes across the county line? Are the schools better across the line? Are you just throwing it in to get the value up? Or is there, or is there a true reason why you're putting it in? How strong do you know, how to adjust that comp compared to the subject? Does that make sense?
Probably need to step back a little bit, and I apologize to you. Karis is an appraisal management company. Does everybody have an idea of what appraisal management companies do? If you don't, appraisal management companies have been around for a very long period of time. You probably never heard of them until 2008. In 2008, the government said, okay, everything's tanked. The real estate market's in the can. All right, mortgage companies, banks, credit unions, you can no longer speak to appraisers. Appraisers, you can no longer communicate to the banks, credit unions, mortgage companies. So appraisal management companies became a little bit bigger in 2008. One of the reasons behind that, and I'll tell you that Karis, we opened in 2013. We've only been open in 2013. We're licensed in 33 states. We have 37 mortgage partners. Movement's by far my best because I work there. Stephanie Pence, she knows every appraiser on our panel. We have 9,600 appraisers in the 33 states in the District of Columbia that are on our panels. We utilized 3,200 of them last year to do appraisals. So Stephanie knows all the appraisers that there are in Charleston, in Indian Lake, in Rock Hill, everywhere, Columbia, and she will assign that appraiser. It's what we call geocoding. There's a lot of appraisal management companies that just throw the bid out there, ask for the lowest bid, and take that, and that's your appraiser. It's not the way Karis works, but there's hundreds and hundreds of appraisal management companies. So I just wanted to share with you something that makes us a little bit unique.
And I'm going to add my 2 cents. I was an independent appraiser since 2006 and had worked with Karis for several years. And I don't think I'm telling any secrets here when I say a lot of appraisers don't really care for appraisal management companies. But I genuinely was so impressed with Karis and the way that they handle things, and the respect for the appraiser is just shines through. And when I was asked to join the team, even though I don't think that I would have joined it just any AMC, I do think that Karis has a lot of value add to the whole process.
What's considered, when you look at an appraisal, maybe I'm stealing some thunder, when you look at an appraisal, there's above finished square footage and there's below grade commentary and adjustments. How much of the house has to be below grade in order to be considered the basement or the lower level that's in that section of the appraisal?
50%.
Any of them, an inch below grade makes it a finished lower level or unfinished lower level. Is the value, let's talk a little bit about basements and value, because a lot of people are concerned that if they're finished and they put a lot of money in it, they don't get the value out of it. Myth. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Again, that it does depend on where you are in the market, but at the same time, if the basement is done to the same degree as the above grade, and the lighting and the windows, the exterior, and all of that, you want ceiling height, you're looking at all the different factors that play into finish, and the usability and functionality of it. And as long as you can do that, you have to report it. Appraisers have to report it underneath. But there's no rule that says you can't give it the same value as the above grade. If you can support it by the market. So when you are coming in, and we'll get to this at some point, but when we talk about what you should do when you're ordering an appraisal, first step, if you should submit information to the appraiser. If you know of a house that has a basement on it, that would be a good one, for your subject or your listing. That's something you want to share with the appraiser, so that, a lot of times in my area, the MLS will list it as the total square footage. And then when you when you find one with a basement, you kind of have to back out of it and look at each of them and figure out how much of that total square footage of comparable is actually basement. And then you go through and you look at all of the basement finishes, the pictures, and you try to make some rhyme or reason in terms of adjustments to that. So basements should add value, do add value. Growing up, I had a basement and I spent a lot of time at the level, so I wish I had a basement now. But basically, it depends on the market and what people are looking for.
What about swimming pools? I have a swimming pool. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. Is it worth anything? Not until June.
Again, yes. You can't.
What's the answer?
It depends.
Oh, you get one. Yes, it depends. You have to find houses that have pools in order to give it value?
Ideally. If you want to give it value, if you're going to give it value, you do have to find a comparable, I would think, to do it, to extrapolate these, to isolate how much you want to get for it. I know we've all seen appraisals where they just add 10,000 to it and move on. Things change all the time. Think about when COVID hit. Everybody wanted to back out their backyards to make sure they had a pool so that the kids didn't have to go down, whatever, don't want to get political. But there's all that different stuff going on. And factors that change as differences in communities and economy, everything affects that. And pools are one of those things. And one buyer might find value in it, the next buyer won't. Maybe it's dangerous for this family, but it's a total value add for another family. So It's just something you have to be able to weigh. And again, if you disagree with the appraiser, the suggestion is to find some comps that, that, wait a second, this house really did sell for $27,000 more, 5% more because of the pool.
The majority of the comps don't have pools, but they're valid comps. How would you handle that?
You definitely want, you do want to include the comps that don't have the pool, if they're the best comps out there. You put those in. And then, I've had to go this pool was beautiful, but nothing, again, the neighborhood might have 10 pools, but if none of them have sold, that becomes very difficult, right? So if that's the case, you want to go back in time. So if you go back, let's say 18 months, and you find 2 sales within your subject neighborhood, one had a pool and one did not. They're within 100 square feet of each other, similar age and finish. You can isolate it that way, and then do a time adjustment and the other adjustments on it, if that's all that you can find. In other words, you have to be creative to make it work, and I guess less creative than tenacious. You just have to keep looking for comps and things that make sense.
What if there aren't any other pools that sold? There's good comps, like they're all cookie cutter.
Right, so
Would
then
you just add the?
you add the percentage, yes, you add the percentage from where you found it. So you, at some point, you find it, even if it's across town, similar neighborhood. Yeah, but you have to find a value. So I ended up going 3 miles away, but the houses were developed by the same developer. And similar proximity to the center of town, just on the other side. And then from there, you compare the 2 that have sold in that neighborhood and try to figure out the percentage differences. And from there, figure out how it adds or subtracts or doesn't do anything to value.
Okay, so you would add like a percentage of what the value of the pool was?
No. Where's that
That's a great question, and if you didn't hear it, she said, so you wouldn't just add the percentage of what they paid for the pool. And that's an absolute no. And we're gonna get into that in a minute. As a matter of fact, I think we might wrap up the comp section because you are doing a CMA and get into some of the myths about appraisals, okay? Let me ask you a question. You're gonna have the carpal tunnel by the time I'm done doing it. I sold real estate in the 80s. I went through real estate school. In the real estate school, we had to do a CMA, and they gave me a list. Fireplace is worth $2,500. A 2-car garage is worth $10,000. I see some heads nodding. Yep, you went through it too. So for about the first 15 years of my career, I thought fireplaces were worth $2,500. Giving because I had the list. There is no list. Again, she could reiterate over and over and over again. You're going to find it's almost like with the pool thing, they didn't take into account the fact that I have a $10,000 chandelier in my foyer. Well, that's beautiful. Thank you very much. But from a value add perspective, does that add? We'll talk about that now. So there is no list. Everything has to be extracted from the market. You have to find comps in order to bracket what the value truly might be, plus and minus. What about a straight across the board, last question there. Straight across the board bracketing, address that, because first of all, I want you guys to understand the process. We're the middle person. We order the appraisal, we get the appraisal, we send it to the lender. The lender's the one that approves it or asks for additional questions. See, it's so easy to throw it on them now. But we're just gonna communicate that piece. But talk about the bracketing part, because I know that'll help out in a CMA class.
Right. We refer to it as a cross-the-board adjustment. That's just kind of an automatic red flag when you're looking through an appraisal. So again, it goes back to finding a comp to bracket it and putting it in. You don't have to give a lot of weight to it, but you gotta state, appraisers should state how they came up with the adjustment. Now that's a fairly new thing, and if you get an old school appraiser, it's hard to pull it out. Probably not wrong, but they just have to write it down. It's like my son's math teacher saying you've got to write all the steps down to add it. So, you know, so in other words, it's obviously not a paired sales analysis, or otherwise, because you haven't bracketed it, so you can't just throw in an adjustment that doesn't prove the other side.
Listing agents, do you meet the appraiser of the property? If you're gonna take some notes, take notes here. Meet them. It's the only shot you get to meet the appraiser. Don't stalk them. Appraisers are independent contractors. I can't say this while you're here. They're not really friendly. I found one, so I hired her. But they're independent contractors. They work alone. Every appraisal company, with the exception of many, it's just one person. You have the opportunity to say this. I put this on the kitchen table for you. It's my methodology as to how I priced this property. If you want to take it, great. Oh, and guess what else I added? I added a list of every improvement done to this property in the last 15 years. Do not put how much it cost next to that, because every appraiser, being blunt, will say we don't care what it cost. So if you're going to do anything, just let them know, and then I'll be outside if you need anything or have any questions. But meet them. It's the only shot you get to meet them and smile at them. It's probably the only smile they get.
Or, you know, for a while there, we were busier than one-armed paper hangers, as my mom likes to say, and it wasn't always easy. The agents were busy, the real estate appraisers were busy, and meeting at the property became more difficult and time-consuming. That's where you still can put out a call. Everybody is learning how to read tone and text, you know? You just have to, you know, there's no reason not to reach out because they're doing their job, you're doing your job, and you supply the information. Send them an email, ask questions if you need to. That's okay.
Here's something that's important. You as real estate professionals have access to more information about your property and the comparable properties than the appraisers do. You have more knowledge.
Not always.
You know what was for sale by owner.
Where'd that come from?
From an appraiser. Here's the reason I say it. You know specifics about for sale by owners. Some builders don't put their information in MLS. You may know that a property transferred. You guys have a lot of the government just switched over. People come in, people come out. I live near Washington D.C., so it's just changeover day is what we call it. But that can affect, like, if you know that my dad used to work for the government. They used to say, here's what we're going to give you for your house. Get out, go to your next job. And then they sold the house. They gave him his money, and then they sold the property. That can affect the value. And to have that knowledge base is important. So that's kind of what I mean by, yeah, they do. They have more information than we do because you've seen those houses. They see it on paper and outside as they drive past it. So take your knowledge and impart it to them. They're never going to be offended unless you say anything beyond, here's my methodology for how I price the property and the 15 years of home improvements, and I'm out. And you go on, follow them around, they might get a little like, a lost dog bark at you.
And it will always be beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And, you will often have a discussion about, well, they just put in all new gold-plated appliances. Well, guess what? There's very few buyers out there that really want gold-plated appliances, much less to pay 50% more for the house for it. So, it's just one of those things. We're laying it out on paper. If you think that the appraiser doesn't quite understand, that's okay too. Don't talk down to them. Give them the facts and do the best you can.
I've been about a year now taking this class out on the road around the country, and there are companies, and I don't know what it's like for you, but there are companies that mandate their agents meet the appraiser. There are companies that say that it's illegal to meet their appraisers. I would look up that law, but it's your one shot. It's worth the time to do that. And if you can't do it, you can at least let them know that you left that information for them. So that's all I have to say about that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
With that being said, as an appraiser, you're going to a bunch of properties, so I hear like you might do the site work on one day, so you're going to 5 houses, and then you're gonna have your desktop work another day. Do you prefer us to leave it in the house, or do you prefer the email, so when you're back at your desk, you can reference things and you're not collecting a bunch of stuff along the way?
Oh, I mean, I don't think it's that big a deal. I would think that email in this day and age, now that we all are pretty much accessing our email from our phones out there. I used to like it when they would give it to me prior, so that when I was planning my day and they had a comp or two that I hadn't seen or thought about, I could throw it in to my drive route. So yes, any kind of courtesy like that, if you didn't, that's okay. Appraisers are supposed to take a picture of every single comp thing, that can be argued all day long. But basically, it is good to know where you're, if there are some that you're looking. I try to call agents and say, if you have any that I may not be seeing, let me know.
And then one other question. I know that there's a desktop appraisal, so sometimes you don't have to go into the property. Is that still the case? There's no standard behind that?
It depends. And it depends on the mortgage company. Like Bubba will tell you that when he as an originator runs to you, or runs whatever it is you call it, is that what you call it?
So we run every conventional loan through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac's underwriting system, which is called.
He could get what we call PIW, property inspection waiver. That means no appraisal is needed. Has anybody in here ever gotten a call saying, as a listing agent going, wait, well, where's the appraiser? I haven't seen him yet. And they go, we don't need one. That's because Fannie and Freddie said you don't need one. Here's the challenge behind that. I do this all the time. I did it last week in Charleston, South Carolina. The guy called me and goes, I had a PIW. They processed the whole loan. It's Thursday night. It's 5:13 p.m. Gary said, Steve, I lost my PIW. We close at noon tomorrow. So I no longer have that waiver. I need an appraisal. Why can that happen after they've been processing a loan for 20, 30 days?
Because you use Truist.
What's that?
I worked at Wells Fargo JV. 18 years. You nailed it, Truist.
All right, so I can add a piece to that.
Please do.
So what happens is, as you're processing the loan, and we run that through underwriting right off the rip. So when we do a pre-approval, we don't have an address, but when it goes under contract and we add that address and we run it through Fannie Mae's underwriting system or Freddie Mac's, we get that PIW. But a lot of times, we don't have all the documentation from the borrower yet. So they may have told me they got $20,000 in their savings account with whoever. Well, I get that bank statement, they got 12. They don't have 20. All that impacts the algorithms for how they underwrite the online underwriting of this loan. So you may get a appraisal waiver with $20,000 in reserves, but if you only got $12,000 in reserves, we will run it again, and maybe that PIW is gone.
Or even more importantly, so you go from 20 to 12, you rerun it, and the PIW is still there. That's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. He's all set. And then 3 days before closing, they need to verify the earnest money deposit. So they have to get an updated bank statement. And then they enter that number in, and it's $11,999, and all of a sudden you lose your PIW for $1. PIWs are going to come in, and any type of desktop. I can't answer questions about desktop because we don't participate in that world.
Okay, so it's not like an appraiser, like being able to do anything. You can do the pricing approach, you can do desktop, you can do normal.
Yes, so some companies do desktops. They are allowed. I would again advise you to advise your borrower to, make sure that it is double check the numbers, double check that the appraiser isn't coming in from somewhere out of town, double check that they're properly licensed. I think that there's definitely a time and a place for them, but I just, buyer beware.
I always tell people an appraisal waiver is fantastic, but I often get a phone call from an agent that says, hey, we're at 80% and these people have good credit. We should be able to get an appraisal waiver, right? It doesn't work like that. I don't know if I'm going to get an appraisal waiver until I run it through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac's underwriting system. I ran one the other day, contract, good to go, no appraisal waiver. We ordered an appraisal, sent it through underwriting, they ran it through underwriting, guess what we got? We got an appraisal waiver now because they showed more assets or had better income or whatnot than what we had originally thought. But we still have an appraisal that was done.
But so this is a lender question, because it's important to you. So you get the PIW back, but you still have to use that appraisal, right? Because you have it?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know how this audience would take this, but careful what you wish for. You want these properties appraised. We want to make sure that we're not headed back into 2008. As painful as the process can be, and it is for appraisers too, it still has a purpose, eyes on the ground, so on and so forth. That really is the checks and balances that we all need to be aware of.
So anyway, in Charleston, this is the relationship business, and that's what you guys are in, is a relationship business. In Charleston, Stephanie picked up the phone, called a guy by the name of Bill Stanton. Bill said, well, I'm out to dinner right now, but you know what? I go by there on my way home. If I can get in at 8 o'clock tonight, I'll have it back to you in the morning. So that leads to a question. How much, I'm going to ask you, how much of the appraisal is completed when the appraiser goes to view your listing, your subject property? How much is done?
Depends.
Depends. Depends on the appraiser.
Good.
No, consistently, we see on average the same answer. And I've never asked you this question, so it'll be interesting. I heard 10%. Anybody else? 80%. How much of your appraisals are completed? How much work have you done before you go into the subject property?
It depends.
You win.
How busy am I that week? How many orders do I need to go see on the field that I have time to preload it? In an ideal world, the appraiser would have done 80%. It makes it much easier. That being said, then you get out to the property, and I just had to do one the other day. I just had to help an appraiser the other day. They just put a $2,000 square foot addition on the back. It's a totally different beast. I wasn't prepared for this. I had to go back out. I'd already had all this work done. So, that again, you gotta think about that. We also do really strive to hire or, not hire, but work with good appraisers. And we hope that our philosophy and way that we treat appraisers shines through in how they treat you and how they treat their work. So I will say that is, that's key. I understand there's always going to be frustration, but we really are trying to grease the wheels and make this process easier.
Yeah, appraisers are there they don't go out there going, let me see how I can make this bad boy come in low. They are there to help if they can. You have a question? Go ahead, please.
I don't have a
No, I just forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry. So if an appraiser is doing work ahead of time, do they have access to MLS? What are they looking at? So they're
Yes.
looking at MLS, they're looking at the same data we in theory have.
Yes.
For the most part.
We look at the same thing. We should have access to agent notes. I don't know how your MLS works, but in Tidewater we have Virginia, we have agent remarks that don't necessarily get sent over to the customer or to the potential buyer from the agent. So we have access to that. We have access to all the pictures. We have access we should have access to the county website. We should be able to research sales and all of that. yes, we have it all, but it's, sometimes MLS might have it geocoded, a comp geocoded 2 miles away, but it's not 2 miles away. So that when we went for our initial search, it didn't pop up. So that's where you might come in handy and say, that house 2 streets over sold. Why isn't that on your thing? Wait a second. I mean, that's happened to me before. A very good comp has been right around the corner, but it was mislabeled in MLS. So like all things, garbage in, garbage out. You know, the data is important.
That's a great question because quite often you will have that situation, not saying anything against the hurry that you guys sometimes have to be in, but you may enter in 100 Anderson Way and it's 100 Anderson Road. So the appraiser's done all their work on 100 Anderson Way when they've really started working on the wrong part. There's a young lady back here and then I'll leave.
So as a listing agent, I know certain times when it doesn't appraise or, and it comes in and those buyers will walk away, and then you get to the next folks that come in. And I've heard kind of different things, but what happens to that appraisal that didn't appraise? And I know there's a fact where you said there was some people borrowing that it might not appraise because of them, but what is the best practice to do to adjust for that or not adjust for that, or what is the industry standard, I guess?
See that guy in a white shirt behind you? And the other way. See, that's a lender question. For us, we get an order, we order it, it goes back. I had a question yesterday from a loan officer that said, hey, we did this loan 8 months ago, new construction, and they're refinancing now. Can we just get a reconsideration of value? It's a brand new order. It's all new, but you can address that, Ed.
So we will have a conversation, and if it's appraised or isn't appraised, we can determine then. We go ahead and work with them. The only time it stays with the property is on the FHA.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I was gonna say, I'm talking about total provider.
It's a myth, by the way, Ed. Look, that's a lender question. That's completely for like a Susan Wright. So I was corrected once when I was in the mortgage business that said, you can get a new case number and not have to use that appraisal on an FHA loan. But that's a completely different discussion. And Ed's going to pick up the phone and call.
You know, we actually have a whole department that's dedicated to tracking down the case number and if you upgrade.
But that is a myth that you're stuck with that appraisal for 6 months. That's a myth.
Are there times you should, like an appraiser goes, well, this backs up to, 485, and, this is like.
So there is time we should, and we've also done what's called research. Like we just did updated comps for adjustment based on the current market value. So there's time when we should do that as an appraisal.
And we're going into that, aren't we?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to cruise through this so we can get to that because that's a key. That's a key. That's a great segue. Hey, does a bedroom have to have a closet?
No.
Did I hear it? Absolutely not. You have houses here that were built in 30s, 40s that didn't have closets. They had armoires. Now, if you have a subdivision where the builder's not putting in closets, that may be an issue because that's just the expectation of the current market. But
You don't have to have a closet to have it.
you don't have to have a closet for it to be called a bedroom. With regard to windows as to and exits, I mean, there are, what do they call it when you go into one bedroom and you have to go through that bedroom to get to another one?
Functional,
Obsolescence.
sorry, yes. I got up at 3:30 this morning.
Love that lady. She flies home at 1 o'clock this afternoon. It doesn't have to have a closet. We can whip through that. We all agree upon that? Cool. Seller concessions will definitely affect the subject property, all for you.
Say it again.
Seller concessions.
Oh, that is definitely got a whole, a lot of discussion over the past several years, but, how do they affect the market? It depends how, the appraiser should know the market. They should know how much the market is willing to bear without it really affecting the value. So in my area, at one point, I'm not sure that it's the case now, there was very typical to see between 1% and 5%, or 0% and 4%. And if that was the case, and all of those concessions fall within 0 to 4%, so it looked like most of them did that, then you don't really need to adjust. They don't seem to be impacting the value. If you're seeing if you're seeing a property that's not adjusting, it doesn't really make much sense, you know, then you start to realize that there's something going on there, and you call the appraiser should call the agent and say, what's going on here? So my MLS at home doesn't list concessions, doesn't itemize them or require the agent to put them in perfectly. So there are a lot of times there does need to be a call. You might find that, oh, they gave them 10% in concessions, and they left the John Deere in the shed. So that will affect value. That's why that's property selling for that much more. That would be a time to put an adjustment on.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and let me simplify this. Seller concession on the subject property won't affect anything. The seller concessions on the comparable properties could. Does that make sense? Yes.
Along those lines, that answered part of my question. Now that commissions are no longer in the MLS, and no one has to be that now, and that can be quite substantial, how is that being taken into consideration in value?
I'm gonna let Molly answer first, and then I'll give you a quick and dirty response. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
There's not enough data. There's not sufficient data for appraisers to know whether or not it affects value. So there. Yep. Now my turn. Your turn. You go ahead.
That's yes.
Is that the answer?
Yes.
Cool.
That's
I'll
the
give
answer.
myself.
But a good appraiser again would take it into account and acknowledge it within the body of the report, and will have done their due diligence to try to determine if that is something that may be affected. But there really is not a lot of data right now, very little, and it's going to take a little while for this to come out in the wash. But as you're seeing it, you're allowed to vocalize it, and we'll all figure it out together.
Yeah, so it's similar to, you know, you have a million different examples. I live in Maryland, we have a transfer tax. It's pretty hefty. And there's an addendum that says customarily this is shared 50-50 between the buyer and the seller. And sometimes, especially in 2020-21, the buyer paid it all. So doesn't that affect it? Well, you know, it was what was the market bearing at that particular time, because contractually that was disclosed. But, you know, the wonderful job that NAR did for you guys, we don't know. And then we can't include it if we don't know. And that's not a big question they ask when they come out is, it's not, who's paying commission?
How much you getting for this one?
You know, so there's not enough yet for it to bear. Now, if that continues on and consistently a buyer is required to pay, a buyer on average is required to pay, then it may affect value.
And again, appraiser should be able to read the market. You know, did this affect it? How many days is it on the market? Is it, you know, did it turn around in one day? What other things were going on there? So, you know, market time should be triggers for people.
So that we can get to the ROE process, I just want the last one, multiple offers. Does the appraiser care about that? Yes or no? No. They care. They're not going to utilize it. I mean, that goes to demand, right? They're not going to utilize that, you know, why don't you give me all 7 other contracts and I'll take a look. It does, I don't want to say impact, but influence them in terms of the demand for a specific property. So it's important for them to know. They may shutter that off and say, I don't care, but let them know. Look, I don't know if this impacts you or not, but there were 7 offers on this house.
And there's a whole little part on the appraisal that says, you know, oversupply, undersupply, stable, all of that affects, especially now they're starting to monitor our marketing time, our market time adjustments. So that would play into that, and whether or not we do an adjustment based on lack of inventory.
Yes, ma'am.
Based on the days on market, as an appraiser, are you looking at, hey, this region is 45 days on market and you're taking adjustments if something goes above that? Or how are you gauging that adjustment?
Again, it more factors into the marketing time, and if there needs to be an adjustment to the sales, based on the sales dates of the comparables. And then the last part of your question, can you say it again? I'm sorry.
Just based on, is there an average days on market that you're looking at, and then?
Yes, so when an appraisal comes back and it says the marketing time is 0 to 30 days, but 3 of the comps sold at 99 days, then that, that's not right. They have to put in what the predominant market time is for that market.
Does it affect value?
Yes.
Okay.
It all plays into, was this price too high? Was this price too low? How many times was it reduced? It's pretty funny because I am very gray. There's a lot of different ways to look at things, and I take all of the different factors into account. And Mars and Venus, my counterpart that works with Steve on these sometimes is very much yes or no. So, as with everything, it depends.
I want to see those hands again. There were a lot of, how many listing agents have had a property come in below value? Keep your hand up if you rebutted that value or did a reconsideration of value. It's all the same thing. Keep your hand up if they changed the value. Why, those hands that are up, why did they change the value?
We can give them sufficient comps to prove that the value is wrong.
So, okay, perfect. What else? Yes, ma'am? So there was a 3-bedroom house that they said, and it was actually a 4-bedroom house. So you're all dead on right. There's finally some guardrails around that sandbox of this process. There never used to be until recently. There were, in my mind, only 2 reasons to do a reconsideration of value. One, they didn't have the information on other properties that you have. They didn't have the comps, and you want to provide them better comps. 2, it's wrong. It's a 4-bedroom house, not a 3-bedroom house. I don't know what kind of speed dating you did on the way through that thing, but it's a 4-bedroom house. So 2, it's wrong. 1, it's wrong. 2, there's data that they didn't have that you want to provide to them. And then now there's a 3rd reason, and it's based upon discrimination. So now there are 3 different ways. And people are going to want to borrow your cameras because of this, because they can't see it back there. I looked. So really, that's it. Now be careful about one thing. Measurement of homes. You listed a property 7 years ago. You sold it. The appraiser came out, listed it at 2,000 square feet. Those people are ready to move. They call you up. You list their property today. An appraiser comes out, the same guy that did it 7 years ago, and all of a sudden that house is 2,700 square feet. Why? Because in April of 2022, the appraisal industry went to a standard of measurement. It's similar to, they also use it for medications and other things. It's a standardized measurement. And it's the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, you will hear it. So never do an ROV based solely upon the wrong square footage, because every appraiser now has to use that standardized measurement process. Is there a variance? Yes. If you ask me, you ask Curry, you probably get 2 different reasons, but I'd say maybe 100 square feet, depending on the size of the property.
Right.
So there's a little variance in there. But that standardized measurement never, unless it's completely off and they forgot a room.
Yes. Which happens.
Don't do a reconsideration value over square footage, because guess what they're going to do? They're going to go back out there, they're going to measure it again, they're going to come up with the same measurement they did before, and somebody, buyer, seller, loan officer, never, is going to pay $200 for them to come back out. So if you write down that tip is never.
Our rule is, if you say that square footage is off on the appraisal as part of your ROV, we often come back to you and say, do you have any support for that? Where is the sketch? What are the numbers that are doing? Because, be warned, if we send that appraiser back out and he verifies the same square footage, the borrower is charged. If he comes out and he did miss something, we eat the charge. And that's okay, and that does happen. I'm just saying, don't just, because your seller says, 10 years ago when I bought this house, this is what they said. Try and get a little bit more substantial facts than just that.
So the process is this. Bubba's doing the loan. The borrower says, wait a minute, this should appraise differently. I think this should happen. So there's a reconsideration of value form that's now standardized. Ours used to be you can submit 3 additional comps. Now the standardized form is you can submit up to 5 additional comps. You don't have to, you just give them 1, but you can go 1 through 5 should you choose to. That goes back to Bubba. Bubba submits that to his appraisal underwriting department. Okay, quick ad for Movement. We work with 37 different partners around the country, and Movement is the only one that I know that has appraisal underwriters. They don't look at credit, they don't look at income, they don't look at cash in the bank. The only thing they look at is appraisals. So we like, or maybe you do, like talking to those people because we're not talking about the whole loan in general. We're just talking about appraisals. So they're going to review that. Appraisal underwriter is going to review that and say, they're right. That is wrong. They should say it. It goes to Molly from the appraiser, from the mortgage company. Molly then communicates with the appraiser that this is a reconsideration of value. I could be completely wrong here, but
You're right.
okay, good. Stop me when I'm wrong. Then the appraiser has 48 hours to address that reconsideration of value and return it to us. We take a look at it to make sure it's cool. We send it back to the lender.
Okay.
Make sense?
Warning.
Warning.
One, they have now made the rule. 1 ROV is all you get. So make it good, plead your case, don't scribble a couple of addresses down and throw it to them. If there's any, really put down why you think it is a better comp. Not the address and the sale price. That's not the way it goes. We actually ask that you do not put values on your comps. But it is important to put down that this was actually half a mile closer than comp 5. This is the exact same layout as the subject. Why wasn't this one included? Those are all legitimate things. You will get much better results with those types of arguments and reasoning than just this one sold for that high.
One of Molly's jobs is to take that reconsideration of value and review it before it goes to the appraiser to make sure there's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there, that addresses, that could influence value. It's just, these are better comps. 2 things. 1, if it's incorrect, that's easy. That's the easiest ROV you'll ever do. You don't have to even submit comps. You just submit, this is wrong. Chances are pretty good that they'll look at it quick, and they'll correct it. I'm going to answer your question in just 1 second. What did you say earlier about good news, bad news, or be careful, or whatever? I have seen reconsiderations of value come in because these comps were better than these comps. And the appraiser goes, you know what? You're right. And lowers the value. You're submitting a reconsideration of value, though, if they accept your comps, just beware that can happen.
And I'll just say for fun, nothing makes an appraiser happier than when you submit alternative comparables and we put them in the grid and it totally supports the value we came in at. But just for fun.
Yes, ma'am.
Somewhere along the way that the appraisers, if they get so many rebuttals, they get dinged in the system, is that a thing? Like they get kind of a mark with Karis?
Let me walk on eggshells here. And then if you want to talk to me individually after the class, I'll tell you the real answer. We very specifically grade every appraisal that's done internally. We do that. We do it on a number of different items on that appraisal that are very important to you. You said one of them. I won't go into what they are, but one of them is turn times. We have a very specific service level expectation at Karis. Ed, Bubba, you are an appraisal today, right now, 10:02. It's in South Carolina. Our expectation with Stephanie is that by 11 o'clock she find an appraiser and assigned it within an hour. We hope that they accept it, and if they don't, she'll find somebody else. We expect in our engagement letter, and I think we say it, I don't know, that we will have that appraisal back in 7 business days? 7 business days? 5 business days, 7 work, I don't know what it is. But so, here's the important thing about that. 1, we grade them internally. 2, I employ 2 other companies to review appraisers and appraisals. This is a regulatory thing. We want to make sure that the form is right, they're doing their job, everything's correct. So there's a lot of review on appraisers, internally and externally. Does that answer your question?
Well, and that's how Karis handles it, but of course it goes out there, right? And
So we also have panels. What's down here? True Homes, is that around this joint?
Yeah.
Okay, so True Homes. So we have, this is kind of touchy. We have panels, you're supposed to have panels in different areas that the appraisers can cover. We have panels for True Homes. Now, we have plenty of appraisers on that panel, so we're not specific to any appraiser. But the reason I'm dancing around this is the process to remove somebody from a panel is dictated by the state, and it's painful to go through. You have to send them a letter, you got to send them specifics, they have a chance to respond. So is there a bench we put them on?
That's right. I was a lifeguard for years.
Yeah.
Sit on the bench.
Timeout.
some of them might refuse your rebuttal just because they want to be on the bench. Is that a fair?
No, not at all.
We
Nobody
make
knows
the
about the bench.
engagement letter, your service level agreements are, you must address 1 rebuttal. They have to do that. And, that is where we can't continue to badger the appraiser. That will flag us, and then we're out of business. I mean, that's just not okay. So that's where you have to give some thought to it and make sure that it makes sense, that you didn't put in the same 3 comps that they used as comp 4, 5, and 6. Just really pay attention to it, and we hold the appraiser's feet to the fire to look at the reconsideration of value. Before we send it back to you, I say, wait a second, he didn't really answer that question. And I'll ping him back. Look, I don't think this is quite answers your question. Can you expand?
I'll answer your question in a minute, but here's something you might want to write down. This is important. What did I say? Order it within an hour, get it back within a short period of time. Right now, they're not overly busy. If you're a listing agent, if you're anybody, and you know that a house identical to your house is settling tomorrow and is the ultimate best comp, tell Bubba, don't order the appraisal till tomorrow. Because once they visit that property, that's the effective date of that appraisal, and then that property that settles tomorrow becomes just an additional comp that's on the market. Does that make sense? Pick up the phone, call, and say don't order it till tomorrow. And that's just because of our service level expectation with our mortgage partners. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a question about number 2. So I've been seeing a lot, of course, in the news and all of that. How do you prove that? With the deficiencies?
I'm gonna let you answer that. This is the new one.
We didn't hear the question.
Deficiencies which include potential violation of fair housing laws or professional standards related to non-discrimination. So you want to know how you prove it. That's the newest one. It was added months ago, and I have to turn to you because I have no idea. There's something called bias. Is that along the same lines?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, appraisal bias, if you suspect it, try to have some facts to back it up. And it will be reviewed. We have a program that we just recently reviewed and leveraged it that shows all sorts of data. So the new thing is you're not allowed to use the word church, even if it's on Church Street.
So if you guys ever want to have fun, Google Freddie Mac's forbidden words. on appraisals. You can't use walking distance. Why? Maybe you don't walk. You can't use close to churches, close to parks, close to shopping. You can put 1.2 miles to a religious whatever.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I think more specifically, somebody's got a call bias, and then the onus is on the appraiser to say, because you look at an appraisal and he used comps, and going back to that subdivision, on the other side of the track. Why didn't he use comps where we are? And it came in lower because of that. That could determine discrimination. But the only way that that can be proved is if somebody calls it out. Does that make sense? They would have to completely justify, why they did what they did and how they did it. And it's a tough one. They just added this recently, but I've never seen discriminatory appraisals based upon location or, jurisdiction or what have you. Ma'am, you had a question behind there.
Yes, I'm sorry. I have a question regarding or there's a property coming soon, and we can see it, but they can't. Is that taken to? Should we wait and request the appraisal as coming soon? I know we see closed properties as the only.
No, that's the one where you provide to the appraiser when you're scheduling, and it can be taken into account. It all adds to the data that throws it in if you're going to give it, the higher end of the range or the lower end of the range, especially in a market where there haven't been a lot of sales. So yes, but they can't hang their hat on it by any means, but they can use it as further support.
All right, I want to respect you guys' time. Everybody raise your right hand, please. Repeat after me. I state your name. Did anybody say state your name? Because am now a certified appraiser. Excellent, you're now a certified appraiser. I'm going to show you some actual pictures, -1, you'll be able to figure it out, from actual appraisals, and you're going to tell me what the conditions are on that appraisal. Now, let me preface that by saying, every one of you have as much knowledge, if you can find it online, about FHA conditions as an appraiser does. It's all online. It's spelled out. If there's peeling, painting, whatever it is, if there's a trip hazard, this, that, whatever. You'll know when you go list that property what needs to be done before you show that property. Have them do it, because they charge $200 to come back out. So have them do it. That's on an FHA loan. Let's talk about both FHA and conventional. These are some of your conditions that you put on appraisals as licensed appraisers. And now, some of you might just, if you want to walk up here, this is not a formal setting, so feel free, come on up. This is a house. This is not like beautiful stucco. That's paint. FHA, you're an appraiser. FHA says what? You got to fix it, but fixing is very specific about sanding, scraping, prepping, all of that bit, including every single paint chip on the ground and repainting it. Conventionally, you have a conventional contract. You're an appraiser. What do you call for? Hey, you're the appraiser. Is conventional required? Are you required as if it's a conventional loan to call this? You're required to address it. I will tell you what will happen with 37 out of 37 different lenders. You're an appraiser, you say it's fine, and then you address it. I'm taking this into consideration in the value of, and if you guys want to talk about C1 through C5 and all of that, we can talk about that. But you don't make them do anything. You take it into consideration in the value of the property. Work for you? Cool. That's what Fannie and Freddie says. That appraisal goes to his appraisal underwriting department. Remember, the mortgage company is responsible for that buyer and the property and the collateral and everything else. And an appraisal underwriter might say, I don't care if it's conventional or not, they need to fix this. So just be aware that depending on your contract, maybe not, the requirement will be there. You know what it is if it's FHA because you can look it up well in advance. Make sense? Cool. How many of you listed a vacant property? I just get on my hands and knees and I beg you. You'd be amazed. Should the utilities be on when the appraiser goes out there? Yes. FHA required. Conventional, this area, you know, what happens if we're coming out of winter, the pipes have been closed, and now they turn them on, they burst. So, you know, it's a safety issue. 40%, 4 out of 10 vacant properties that we order appraisals on, the utilities aren't on. The appraiser gets a bonus of $200 once you turn them on and goes back out there. Turn the utilities on before the appraiser goes out. Save some money. 4 out of 10 don't. Let's change that piece of it.
And we want to work with you on that. We do ask the appraisers to do it. We can't mandate it because it ends up being some he said, she said. But, you know, if the appraiser doesn't ask me what field, if the utilities are on, say, I'll make sure the utilities are on. Work together. Because those extra fees add up, and we all know it, and it's the only person hurt is the borrower.
When I sold real estate in the 80s, I never saw an appraisal that had a toilet flushing and water on in the sink, and you see pictures of that now on appraisals. So they are, you know, they're held responsible to make sure that everything's working and running. Let's talk for a second about handrails. If you can see it, this is just Steve's joke of the day. This is actually from one of our appraisals. But this house, this is a door for those of you in the back. The appraiser addressed the fact that the door was screwed shut, boarded up, and everything else on the interior of the property and didn't pose a threat. And he took it into consideration. So don't automatically think you have to have handrails and stairs, but it was not accessible. There was no danger. This, FHA says what? Based upon this, so you have to put handrails. Based upon how many steps? 30 inches. 30 inches. 30 inches. I think that's what FHA says.
But if it's only one step and it's 30, you know, you can't say number of steps because then you're getting into code.
Exactly. So local specific code can also affect what needs to be done and what doesn't need to be done. From an appraiser standpoint, and from your standpoint as listing agents, think about this. Is it an old guy or a little kid? Is it going to cause a safety issue? Older, younger, safety issue. And if it is, address it. Now here's one thing that I wish I had the picture. Don't go out and buy a yard of mulch and put it on either side of the steps to make it and measure it at 30 inches. You laugh, people do it. So railings and hand railings, banisters, whatever
We
you
just
call
had
it.
this conversation the other day. If you're the agent, somebody was complaining that an FHA appraiser called out it's old school laundry hangers in the backyard, the metal pullers. Clothesline. That was rusted, and the FHA appraiser called it out. Well, or it was peeling paint. We have to call it out. Appraisers, FHA now, they've threatened, they've got people looking at these reports. Why didn't you call this out? This is our license. If you think it's difficult dealing with us, try dealing with a HUD. So I've told you this before, why didn't you go get a can of spray paint and paint it? It just needs to have a coat of paint on it, you know? So just be aware of that stuff, and you can't, you know, it's not the appraiser's fault. It has to be called out.
Going back to the beginning of this class or discussion, we don't do VA appraisals. VA is its own different animal. They have panels. You can get a case number from VA. So, were you ever on panel?
I know about it.
So, if you have questions, ask her. Trip hazards. Now you can pick one picture that wasn't from an actual appraisal. But trip hazards, it's both interior and exterior.
Sidewalks outside, driveways outside, is it a hazard to someone? And it's that simple. We've had different appraisers do this with us from local jurisdictions, and they're like, it's common sense, I believe was the word that they all use. So you can go on about that. Now, has anybody gotten a condition for a certification from another person? Like, well, let me ask you this question. Are you a structural engineer? No. So, Molly can't say that that's fine because she's not a structural engineer, but she can condition the appraisal for a structural engineer's report. But sorry about this. This is actually a lot loan. They're tearing that down. Are you a licensed electrician? So they may call on some cases for a licensed electrician to inspect and certify that everything's cool. Are you a licensed roofer? Same deal. They may call for a certification on whether that roof is good. Remember what appraisers are doing so even with the foundation on the previous picture and this picture as well, they're looking at the inside of the foundation. They're not digging it out to see if there's a problem on the outside. They're only visually seeing that. Now, this is not a good example, but they go head and shoulders into the attic. Is there evidence of leaking? That's all they know. So if they're not comfortable with something they see, they might require that you get a certification. Delays. So my advice is just take care of it up front. Don't try and see if it'll go by. Functional obsolescence. I could go on and on about what functional obsolescence is. No closets is kind of similar, something that could affect value, something that's old, that's no longer in properties, or just something that's in California that blows me away. This is from an actual appraisal. This is a real house. Last time we did this in Greenville, they said, yeah, we know where they have houses like that. That's your driveway. Where do you find comps for that? It is next door. That's where you find comps like that. But you have to, in the comp section, you've got to be able to find a similar property that has that feature and see if it affects value. So,
And again, I have a friend who cannot get out of the house because the driveway is so steep, and if you're time and time again. And in Virginia this year we had a lot of snowfall, so they just took the house off and are going to redo it in the summer. But I will know now that does affect the value, or can affect the value.
And to respect your time, make sure we get to your second part of this class today. There's a whole bunch of things that we can stick around for a few minutes on. Short-term rentals. I just shudder. Short-term rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs. Fannie and Freddie will most likely make a decision on, they don't like them. They will we have appraisers that do short-term rentals because they live in that market. They understand that. But hopefully your borrower doesn't need the rental income to qualify, because that's a challenge. I've seen other partners of ours, banks, say it's a commercial appraisal. This is not a residential appraisal, it's a commercial appraisal. That's $1,500, $2,000, right? Ish, for a commercial appraiser to go out there. So we can talk about short-term rentals, we can talk about a lot of different things. The obsolescent terms, highest and best use. You're going to probably talk about some of those things in your CMA class. So if frankly, this lady woke up in Williamsburg, Virginia this morning, flew here, and I'm taking her to the airport to fly home. So if you did anything today, thank her. If you learned anything, thank Bubba and Ed and the team here. If you didn't learn anything, I'm right here, come see me. So with that said, we say thank you, and now it's question time. And I still have some questions. Yes, sir.
On appraisal, you see cost approach, or sales approach, cost approach, and income approach. Can you talk to the differences in those and where they hold weight and where that would actually come in a little bit?
Yes. Fannie actually requires that predominant weight be given to the sales comparison approach? Oftentimes that is a good question. Oftentimes, the cost approach is used to support the value. Some of the reports are required to have the cost approach when you're doing new construction, and there is a lot that goes into the cost approach or should go into the cost approach, including what the land value is. And, having comparables to prove, is this really the land value? That's your starting point. That's the foundation of it. Income is supplemental and is important, and I know that a lot of people depend on that coming in. But again, it's really used as secondary support, and the sales comparison approach is considered the gold standard.
Because to me, whenever I see that cost approach, I'm looking at price and I've never seen any house that could actually be built.
Well, in today's,
$100.
Starting in 2020,
So I didn't know kind of where that number came from.
If you turn around and you ask these gentlemen, they'll tell you that they probably have never seen the cost approach utilized. Because I agree with you, it's kind of like my insurance policy tells me that they can read, if my house burns down, this is what it's going to cost to rebuild it. And I go, no, it's going to cost a lot more than that.
Now, I did have one quick second question that may be more for a second part of this, but accessory dwelling units, just in your opinion, I know taking on an average dollar per square foot, so to speak, or how does that compare to, say, your the main house?
I'll let the appraiser address it as soon as I say this. ADUs are also, I don't know what the word is, but by jurisdiction, like I live in a county that does not allow ADUs at all. So you can't
and
have
we do get appraisers come back and say, this is legal as a single family with an ADU, but it doesn't qualify, it's really a duplex, and how it's zoned and all that. That's hopefully not your problem. But I simplify it the most, I would say it's sort of like a basement. If it's finished to a similar quality and you have a comparable that shows that it's used and useful, then you can support it. Then I'm not going to give it a percentage. I'll give it what it's worth. Now, oftentimes it is a percentage. It's not the primary head. And but again, is this Charleston, South Carolina, where people are going to use those as this, that, and the other thing, as we're seeing our population age and the shrinking of housing, they're going to become more and more useful for a lot of people, and we're seeing it. So
But you
there
also
is value
have
in
to
it.
have a comp that has an ADU.
But if it's illegal, that's a whole different ballgame.
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
So we understand you guys are just like us, and this is kind of like how the whole point of this started in the conversation. We know there's not a list, but is there a way to get like regional data to say, on average in York County, and there's always exceptions and there's always rules, but if we're just looking to start out, because we don't always see the appraisal, an average bedroom gives us roughly this range, or we would prefer that you stayed in the neighborhood and looked at a 3 versus 4 bedroom versus going a mile out to find a 4 bedroom to match the 4 bedroom. Like, are there general, like, is there a rough list? I know there's not a list.
There's not a rough list, there's not a sharp list, there's not a list. Yeah, so
And it really has to be market derived.
it's got to be driven from the market. If it has this and the comps have this, that shows that, and I go back to the fireplace. If all the houses are the same and you only have one with a fireplace, does it add value? I'm not sure it does in Miami Beach, but in Minneapolis, Minnesota it might. But there's not a number there. It's all extracted from the market.
And no one takes like a York County, like where York County, there's no such thing as like pulling that data in, just.
Yes, I mean, the data is where it comes from. So
Yeah.
you can pull the data and look at it.
Side by side. See, I think it's hard for us because we don't always see the appraisal, so we see the comps as a whole, but.
I know a guy.
The appraisal is sent to the appraisal is we don't own the appraisal. The appraisal is sent to the borrower. They have a copy of it. And I'm going to get to you in 1 second. As we wrap this up, before your question, the biggest change in the appraisal industry is going to occur over the next 2 years, year and a half. And that's a complete change to the URAR, the Universal Residential Appraisal Report. The form that they fill out, like if you have short-term rentals now, it's you order 1007 or whatever you order. It's 1004 if it's an investment property, it's this. It's all going to be one form. And based upon the beginning of that form, it will open different, if it's an investment property, boom, it's not going to ask you certain questions, it's going to ask you other questions. So as Fannie and Freddie, who've been working on this for 7 years now, are piloting this out and hope to have it fully implemented by next November of 2026, we will come back with a class that shows you that form and how it affects, because we received a question about days on market and they're going to pay more attention to it. They're not. It's just addressed differently on the new one. Yes, ma'am.
How about if a house, looking at comparable values, they're all in subdivisions and my property is not in a subdivision? That there's no pools, there's no clubhouses, there's no tennis courts, there's no this, but you can't find a comp that isn't in a subdivision.
All the best comps are in a subdivisions, and her house isn't in a subdivision. It's in,
It's on 5 acres.
yeah. Go ahead, you're the appraiser. I'll answer it, but I'll hold you responsible.
I mean, it's
What's
hard to
known
go
as a
15
pain.
miles, but 15 miles is not the same area. It's not even close to the same area. Yeah.
That's where you go and you gotta get, I would do it by a couple different ways of looking at it. I would try to find land value, compare land values between the two places. You do have to know if the market even wants 5 acres to begin with.
Is there value in the tennis court, the swimming pool, and everything else? You have to find whether there is or isn't. If it's the same exact property, and these properties are selling for more money because of the amenities, then that's that.
Which should be able to be proven within a market. You should be able to say, this house is in a subdivision with a pool and tennis court, this one isn't. All things being equal, is there some sort of value? Williamsburg is very much like.
There's no property, it's similar, that's what I get. No similar property.
Then your 5 acres, is that what you're saying? The 5 acres is your subject? Then they have to go back in time or expand their search.
We're going to stick around. Bubba's going to cut me off because we want to keep you on schedule. So you go ahead and wrap it up. It's 10:30, and she didn't have to leave till about 11:15. So if you have some questions, we'll hang out. Make sure you can ask specific to your market.
Hey everybody, my name is Morrell, and I'm with Dream Team United. And I got into real estate in 2007 in Tampa, Florida, and got into new home sales first. I worked for a home builder, David Weekley Homes. In 2008, some of you may remember, like, the Great Recession happened. So at that time, the real estate market in Florida tanked, and they offered me a transfer up here to Fort Mill, South Carolina, where I sold in Baxter Village. In 2014, I got into general brokerage. So that's when I needed to start doing CMAs, and the only experience that I'd had before that was new home sales. As Steve mentioned, the number one common misconception is that there's a list. There is no list. Everything has to be extracted from the market. That said, I'm going to hand out a list.
We might not have enough, but if you guys want the list afterward, we'll give you our contact information.
Because while there is not an official list that an appraiser's going to agree with, we need something to go off of. If we're using like the Matrix CMA tool, there are blocks to put values in there, and we don't have time or money to do an appraisal on every single house. So what I like to do is start with something, start with approximate values that can be adjusted, and then the market is going to tell us what the right price is. But this just helps us to get to a starting point. So I'm going to be talking about the long form CMA, the matrix tool, and Shannon is going to be talking about the quick CMA, and just another way to go about it. How many people use the matrix tool, the CMA? Is it anybody using that? Okay. Cool. Well, where do you get to it? Is you go to Matrix, My CMAs. And then here you click Start a New One. I started one this morning, so we have someplace to go from. But essentially, in the CMA tool, first of all, you're going to select which pages you want to use. I only use these 6. The cover sheet, a summary list, price adjustments, days on market, list price versus sales price, a CMA brief, and a CMA map. But you can see that you can make this thing 35 pages long if you want to. There are all kinds of tools to do that. These ones, activity versus timing, might guarantee to you effect of overpricing. And it's all good stuff. It's all great scripts that are in there. So if you want to add those to your CMA, you can certainly do that. But the way it works is you start with a subject property. You can fill that information from an MLS number, which is what I did with this one. I just chose a property in Waterside at Catawba because that's a neighborhood where there is a little bit of activity that I'm relatively familiar with. So I just put in this one, 406 Briar Knob. It's a home that somebody else sold back in September. And all of the information here on the left filled in automatically, as well as the picture. I'm going to go through that handout you just got and just talk about some of those values, and then we'll go into making adjustments. Actually, I have another copy of the same thing right here that we throw up. Yours has the same information on it, a little bit different format. So first of all, I just want to say this is just a guide. These numbers are not absolutes. Just something to get you started for a typical house in a typical neighborhood. These prices are for a home $400,000 to $500,000-ish. Right? So if you're doing a much more expensive or a much cheaper home, you're going to want to adjust these numbers upward or downward. Ideally, what you want to do is pull 5 actives, 5 under contracts, and 5 closed. In a rapidly changing market, you're going to have to give some credence to those actives and those under contracts, rather than using, a property from 6 months ago. I always adjust the actives and the under contracts by the list price to sales price. And where I get that is I go to the SAM report. Everybody know where a SAM report is? Anybody use the SAM reports? If you don't, you should. You get there, you go into Matrix, into Resources, and it's down here, it says Statistical Analysis Module. And what that allows you to do is just really quickly pull up some cool graphs and great information. I use these, I print out, for every listing appointment I go on, I print out the percent of original price, I print out the price per square foot, I print out the month supply of homes, and these are great just if I have like an engineer type seller, if I have somebody who's into data and graphs and charts, I can generate these in like 15 seconds a piece. And I go and I can lay those out, and just for that type of client, I have something I can show them that looks like, I know what I'm talking about. So that looks like it has some real data, and I put some serious time and effort into the CMA. So for that one, I get the percent of original price. You can see in this neighborhood it's 98.7. So what I would do is I would go to all of the actives and all of the pendings, and I would adjust those prices downward by 2%. Just to account for that, because we don't know what the final sales price is, but the market's telling us that on average they're selling for 98% of the sales price. So I just do that just to give me something. Anything that's been on the market for more than 14 days, I also considering adjusting those down. What I tell my clients when I list a property is that in the first 2 weeks of being on market, we don't have 10 showings or an offer, we're priced too high. And I try to get a price adjustment at that point. Granted, we were, average days on market a couple years ago was like 18, now it's like 55, so maybe that script needs to be adjusted a little bit. But I think when you're comparing homes in your CMA, if it's been out there on the market for a little while, you may want to look at adjusting that price down. And then I take all the closed properties and I adjust those by the contribution to closing costs, which pops right up in the CMA tool automatically. The thing that gets tricky is this section right here. So when I first got into the business and I was using this Matrix CMA tool, I would go in, if the price per square foot for the neighborhood was $200 a square foot, I would put in $200 a square foot in the place where it allows you to make an adjustment, which is right there. And that just wildly skews the numbers. It just doesn't work. So what we have to do for that number is we have to take the average price per square foot of the neighborhood and divide that by 3. So the number that we're going to plug in there, in this case, if it's 200, is going to be 67, not 200. I taught this class a couple weeks ago in the market center, and somebody challenged me on that number and was asking me why you do that, why you wouldn't just use the price per square foot. And I didn't have a great answer other than to say that it doesn't work if you do it that way. And I guess because we're making all the other adjustments, we're going to adjust for things like fireplaces and irrigation and all the other aspects of the home in this tool. So a couple weeks ago, I took the Canopy CMA class just to see if there was anything I was missing there. And what she said was, when you get to that number, you have to choose a different number other than the actual price per square foot. Somewhere between 25% and 33% is what she has seen most. So we still didn't get an answer as to why, other than it works. Any questions about that part? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you will trust.
Go ahead, Tony.
You're giving it 1/3 value square footage over and above
whatever the average square foot price is for the neighborhood, I'm taking 1/3 of that, and that's the number I'm plugging into the tool. So if it's $200 a square foot, I'm plugging 67. Then we're just going to go through some of the other numbers on here. And again, all of these are just kind of how we're going to get close to the right price. Finished basement, I've been using like 1/3 to 1/2. As our appraiser just told us, take a look at the how the home is finished upstairs, look at the basement, and if it's exactly the same, I guess we can get closer to that upstairs number. In my experience, I've never seen the exact same number. It's always been discounted some. And 1/3 to 1/2 is what I typically use. Unfinished basement, I put it in at like $10 to $15 a square foot. Full bath, $8,000. Half bath, $4,000. Again, adjust these numbers if it's a different price point. Fiber cement for siding for the exterior of the home. We're going to have one block on here that just says what the exterior of siding is. I use fiber cement or hardy board or certainty as my standard. And then I adjust upward if it's brick, and I adjust downward if it's vinyl. For just a brick front, I don't make any adjustment at all. So you can see the numbers that I'm plugging in to use there. Fiberboard. Anybody know what fiberboard is? This is like one of my biggest pet peeves. There's hardboard or fiberboard or masonite are not the same thing as hardy board, which is a cementatious product. But so many realtors put hardboard in there instead of hardy board. What they should be putting in is fiber cement. And the difference is hardboard or masonite is that stuff that was popular in like the 80s, and it's a siding that has like a little lip at the bottom. A lot of times if you go look at a house and you see along the bottom edge where the weed whacker has hit it, it's just all like frayed cardboard, whatever. So that product is great if you keep it painted, if you keep water out of it. But as soon as water gets into that product, it swells up and falls apart. That's what hardboard is. So I adjust downward for that.
So hardboard and fiberboard are the same or different?
Same thing.
Okay.
Hardboard, fiberboard, masonite, same thing. Hardy board, fiber cement, or certainty are all the same thing.
What if it's just wood, like actual wood siding?
Yeah, I consider that pretty much the same as like a hardy board product, so I don't typically adjust for that, depending on the condition, of course. 1 car garage, $8,000, 2 car, $16,000, fireplace, $5,000, irrigation, $4,000, fence, $4,000, screen porch, $5,000. That's one that messed me up when I first got started because in new home sales, a screen porch was like $15,000 to $18,000. So that's what I was plugging into this tool. And my first listing got overpriced by $100,000. Patio like $500, deck like $2,000. I know that they cost $10,000, $15,000 to build them. And it's a situation where you're going to be looking at the comps and you're going to be adjusting this based on what the other ones have. So you still have to think about it. You still have to, you can't just plug these numbers in and roll, but this is the place to get started. New roof, like $3,000, which is a tough one because now we're seeing insurance. If the roof is over 10 years old, they're not wanting to insure the properties. But I put in new roof $3,000, new HVAC like $3,000, hard order LVP as opposed to carpet in bedrooms. I put that in like $1,000 a room.
How do you account for pools?
And the pools totally depend. If you're in a neighborhood where everybody has a pool, where everybody wants a pool, then there's value to that.
What if only a quarter of them think that they have it sold?
I don't know.
So I will say, what I've been seeing with pools during COVID, we could probably get about 50 to 60,000 in value out of them. Now it's about 25 to 30.
Oh.
And some of it is a half and half. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
Some of it is half and half. Now I'm seeing people push back that they do not want the maintenance of a pool versus everybody in the South wanted a pool, especially during COVID. So now I'm kind of resetting the expectations of the seller to say, it's not all fine and dandy anymore. Like, we really have to account less for this pool.
You know, it's dependent on the buyer.
It depends on the buyer, it really does,
But-
and what value they're putting behind the pool, but in general, I'm seeing the value is a lot less than what it used to be.
So,
But if I'm going to plug a number in, it's going to be like 20 or 30 grand.
Yes.
So what I wanted to also add to that is oftentimes we get that appraisal in and I get the question, hey, this house is 200 square feet bigger. Why is he only given $66 a square foot when the market's $200 a square foot? It's because of what you already said. The land value, the finishes, the condition, those things are already worked into the appraisal. So those values are already there, you know, so they're already in the appraisal. So that's why they're not using, if the neighborhood's average $200 a square foot, that's why they're not using that, because that house may have better finishes, it may have a bigger lot, so they're already getting value for that. So that's why you'll see a smaller number for the square footage on the appraisal when they're making those adjustments. And that question comes up all the time of, oh, we thought it would appraise more at $200 a square foot. This house is 1,200 square feet bigger, or 200, you know. But it adds to what you were saying about when you're putting it in the CMA, why you use 33%.
Right.
Because those factors are already factored in. Does that help? Does that make sense?
That's great. Yeah.
First person that told us that, so that's great.
And Shannon more often uses the quick CMA tool, so she'll use that full price per square foot because she's not making all the little adjustments. All right, so let's jump into the CMA and just look at some of the adjustments that are made. I already showed you, here we select the pages. Here we put in the subject information. Automatically makes a cover sheet for you. Choosing comps. So here, I already put some in, but essentially you just click this, add from listings. You do a search, just like you would for the neighborhood, just like you're setting up for your clients to find homes. And then you go through, you look at the results, and you choose the ones that you want to use. Once you have, when you do this, pay attention. Like oftentimes, if I have not in a neighborhood like this, but if I'm out in the country somewhere and I have some that are wildly higher than the rest, and some are wildly lower than the rest, a lot of times I'll take the top 1 or 2 prices and the bottom 1 or 2 prices and just delete those, just assuming that they're outliers, and I just want the stuff in the middle. It automatically does a mapping tool. And then we go into the adjustments. So in here, I just scroll all the way to the left. If you look on the top one, that's my subject property. And then the 10 below those are the comps that I selected. I don't make an adjustment for bedrooms. Some people do. I've found that it works out better if I just make an adjustment for the square footage. Because somebody may have an office instead of a bedroom that's taking up that same amount of space. I find that just using the square footage works better. For bats, you can see I plugged in that $8,000 and it just automatically makes the adjustment. So there's one of them that only had 2 bats and it adds that. It's, what is it? Comp, better, subtract. Anybody remember those things from real estate school? Comp, better, subtract. Comp, inferior, add. CBS and CIA were the ones that I learned. So in this case, it's only 2 bats. So the comp is inferior, so I add. Next is the bats. I put in $4,000, which is the number that I used there. Next one is the exterior covering. So vinyl, I subtracted $8,000 for me. Hardy board is my standard. If you look on the bottom, these bottom 2, you can see that it should put that hardboard in there. It's not hardboard, it's hardy board. But you know. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. Exterior features, so things like in-ground irrigation, I have that at like $4,000. That's also where you'd adjust for things like a fence, or a pool, or an outside fire pit, or any of those things. Heating and cooling, interior features. Lot features, here our subject is a cul-de-sac lot. So this is a case where I'd want to go through and look at the lots. I'd want to look at the pictures and see if any of them want to slope or any of them have a big incline in the back. And I may give a little bit of a bump for a cul-de-sac lot. But one thing that's important for your sellers who bought in a neighborhood who may have paid a $3,000 or $5,000 or $8,000 or $20,000 lot premium, those lot premiums are gone. Like you paid those to get that lot. You don't get that back when it comes time to sell your home. If you have a really great lot and it's in a cul-de-sac and it's back to woods, you may get a little bump there. You're not getting 1 for 1 on what you paid.
One of the neighbors, I think, if they have, let's say, 0.1 acres longer because they're green bay, they got a little bit of square footage for the extra acreage, right?
Yes.
The other one does not get back into each other, so they just have a
right.
little bit.
Right. And the question was if homes are back to back versus backed up to woods, you give a little bit of a bump to the home that's just a more appealing lot for most people.
What about the cul-de-sacs with the itty bitty front yard? Like the diamonds? I feel like almost missed the driveway.
Yeah. I think you just have to kind of take your best guess at it. And because some buyers are going to love that. Some buyers don't care about a front yard and they want a huge, expansive, pie-shaped backyard because that's where they spend all their time. So, we can't allow our feelings to go into, would that bother me? Maybe, but for some people they just don't care, as we've learned. Yeah.
The house that's right at the turning point, when you enter the community, against the one that goes all the way back, was there where they have a pond or something? Is there a way that you can differentiate between those?
I don't think there's a rule of thumb there, no. I mean, I had one client who I sold in Baxter Village who had a special needs child who had the ambulance come to their house once a week, right? So they wanted to be in the front of the neighborhood just for that reason. So for this buyer, that was important. Some people don't mind the drive through the neighborhood. They want to be in the back, they want to be private. I don't think you can have a rule of thumb there. Next one's the heated living area. So you can see I plugged in that 67 and it made the adjustments for the square footage automatically all the way down. Acres, we could do something there if we wanted to. In a neighborhood like this, I don't think it really matters too much. Maybe you adjust for that cul-de-sac, maybe just for back to woods. I don't think you do it on the acreage unless there is one that was 3/4 of an acre or something significantly different. Days on market. So I may look at like this one that's been on the market for 66 days and assume that it's probably overpriced. But I'd also want to go back and look at that listing and see that price right now. Well, I guess it's a closed one. But if it were one that was active and it was on the market for 66 days, I may want to look and see, did they just drop the price or is it still holding at the original price they put it at, and decide whether to make an adjustment there or not. HOA fees, whether or not it's new construction. The year built, I normally don't make any adjustments for the year built if it's within 5 years. If it's beyond that, I'll make an adjustment there.
Quick question. So
Yes,
if it's beyond 5 years, what do you make? Let's say if it's new construction 2025, but the comps in the areas are 2004, 2005. What do you make?
Yeah, I think you're just gonna have to look at the homes, compare the two of them. You know, this is where I fall back on like the appraiser line, or it depends. I don't think
The age of the home?
Yeah, the age of the home,
Yeah, you're saying a new home neighborhood versus a 20-year-old home.
Yeah, I mean, the neighborhood is fairly old, but the one home is new.
Oh, one home is new in the neighborhood. Yeah, I might try and look for comps for new homes in similar neighborhoods.
Like 1 mile, 2 mile.
Go out, go out.
Yeah.
I usually start half mile, go out 1 mile,
Got it.
see if you can find something comparable.
Yeah, because there's plus and minuses for that too, because it may be a more established neighborhood with more established landscaping that just looks nicer, but there may be some homes that are in disrepair that need some maintenance.
But you also have to look at what is the max value of that neighborhood too. Like, did they outbuild the neighborhood and they're not gonna get that money back? Because everything else is selling for $400,000 and the new build on the street is $600, so they want to sell at $600. Nobody really wants to buy the most expensive property in the neighborhood, so you're going to have to look at that too.
And then there's another adjustment for seller contributions. So I just go through on the closed ones, I just deduct whatever was the seller contribution on all of this. And then fireplace. There's also, so for each of these, you can go into detail mode, where you can go one property at a time and make more detailed adjustments. You can read the remarks, but I typically just do it in the single line mode. So you do that, you click finish, it generates a beautiful CMA for you. So you can see the pages that I have in there. There's this basically a quick CMA for that first page. Then it shows all the price adjustments that I made for each of the properties, along with photos of them. Shows you list size, sales price, and days on market. And then another summary of comparable properties and a map. So this is like 30 minutes, maybe, of going in using this tool. And you come up with a great looking report. I think that we should be doing it for our buyers as well. You know, I think that little amount of time you can do it, rather than just looking at the quick CMA, like really spend some time and advocate for your clients and make sure that we're priced right. And in general, we don't really have issues with appraisals when we're doing it this way.
So you think it's probably the most accurate way to get as close to the appraisal as possible?
Yeah, I think the most accurate way is to pay an appraiser to go out and do it, probably. But for us to do it, I think this is the most accurate way. But
And I'm going to tell you the opposite.
But
I don't
Shannon
do it that way.
has great success with the way she's going to do it, and she'll tell you about some of that. Yeah.
From your experience doing it that way, how many times do you have to do price adjustments?
Our average days on market right now is 13. In general, we're trying to price them right. The line that I use when I talk to my clients is, I say, I'm just the best vice president you've ever had. I'm going to give you all of my years of experience and give you my best guess at what the price is, what the market's going to tell us. But ultimately, all decisions are up to you, right? So if they opt to price higher than that, then oftentimes we end up making more price adjustments. Using this tool this way, I think we hit it pretty good most times.
And to save yourself a little bit of pain at the end, if they do want to price it higher than what you're suggesting, have an agreement typed up that says within 2 weeks, this is what we're agreeing to drop it to if we're not going under contract. Because they all think it's fine and dandy of, yeah, we'll drop it in a couple weeks, but when that time comes, they don't want to drop it. So if you have that upfront and in writing, it's going to be less of a tough conversation when that time comes.
And that's just like handwritten on the listing agreement. We agree to drop the price on this date if we don't have 10 showings or an offer. Or if we don't get an offer, and just have them initial it. Because when it's time to have that conversation, they never ever remember it. So at least you can.
Or they remember it, but we have these people thinking about it, these people are coming back, and yada yada, there's always going to be an excuse, so. Hey everybody, I'm Shannon Cole. I'm on Dream Team as well with Mike. He pretty much taught me everything that I know, and then I've worked off of that. So here you go. I'm exclusively the listing agent on the team, so this is what I do day in, day out. I sell 60 to 70 listings a year. So a lot of this is going to be gut and intuition, which I know that nobody wants to hear. They want that checklist. But a lot of it is just doing it over and over and over again, learning those different nuances and then applying it. So at any point with our team, you know, this is kind of like, call me if you've got questions or email or want me to review a listing price or, you know, relay some feedback. I'm happy to do that too. I do not do the long CMA. I do a quick CMA for all of mine. I don't trust myself with those adjustments. I feel like I'm gonna adjust for something wrong and it's gonna turn out crazy, and I'd rather see what did something sell at and just get a feeling of the area and just kind of adjust from that. So same as Mike, what I look at, make sure you're looking at those same things. So what I look at is, I look at active, I look at under contract, and I look at sold homes. I'll look at the last 6 months, which is your default usually for closed homes. And I'm gonna factor all of those in, because just because something sold in Q4 and it took 60 days and it had 10 adjustments, doesn't mean that that's gonna necessarily be the case in this market, because we've just picked up since Q4. Same thing with under contract. How long did it go under contract for? Did they take price adjustments? So I'm looking at the history, I'm clicking in the history in MLS, and I'm seeing how many price adjustments did they do, and I'm actually printing out my quick CMA and I'm penciling in, this one sold for $540, I'll do like a $650 and I'll do a downward arrow so I can tell the seller, hey, this started at $650, this is where you want to list it at. They've reduced 20 times to get to this price point. I'll usually start with just a general, you know, easy comparable with looking a quarter mile out. I'll go up if needed to about a half mile, usually try to max out at 1 mile, but I certainly don't start at 1 mile. Bracketing square footage. So if the house is 20,000 or 2,000 square feet, I'm usually pulling comps for heated living area below 300 square feet and above 300 square foot of that square footage. Sometimes I'll pull up or down just in case there's a weird number in there that like we don't want to miss it. Looking at the age of the home, I know that you asked that. So if it was built in the 80s, I'm going to start by looking, I'm going to, right where it says age of home, I'm going to type in 2000 minus. So that's everything 20 years, 2000, age is 2000 minus. So everything built in 2000 and under. So I want to factor out all of those brand new builds when we're looking in the 80s. We'll still try to get, I mean, I might find something that's in the 40s or in the 70s, but I feel like that's better when it's an older house versus just comparing it to that newer house. Extras, like Mike said, looking at acreage, pool, garage size, workshop size. He's giving you that rough standard, but again, I'm gonna have to default to what the appraiser said is there a similar property, not necessarily in that neighborhood, that has that workshop, and what did that come in at? Typically I'm adding for a 2-car garage like $15,000, which is pretty much what Mike said too. School district, this is important, especially when we're getting into some of these Charlotte areas. Is it one of the top ranked schools that everybody wants to get into? So if you're pulling a mile out, are you pulling a different school district and there's a completely different demand? So that might be something that an appraiser doesn't look at. And so that's something when I'm typing up my little cheat sheet to the appraiser of this is in the top school district, I'll add that. Because sometimes they won't recognize that, especially if they're not a local appraiser.
Talk about that real quick. What do you do with appraisers? How do you communicate with them?
Okay, so that's what I was asking, do you really want them to come in person? My thought process is, if I'm an inspector, I don't want somebody following me around. If I'm an appraiser, I don't want somebody following me around. So what I do is 3 days, when I see that the appraisal is scheduled, minimally a day before, I email them my CMA that I use, and then I'm typing in every single update. I'm typing in the updates down to they've painted every room, or they refinished the cabinets. I'm putting, hey, does it back to the woods? Is it in the cul-de-sac? I am putting, I did not use this comparable property because of X. Because they'll use that property thinking it's okay, especially if they do a desktop appraisal and they don't go into that house and actually see the finishes and the condition of the house, and they're gonna get catfished. So you have to tell them, I've been in this house, I'm not using this property because of X, Y, Z. So I do that. If it's a standard, like, hey, I know I'm not gonna have an issue, I'm not gonna do that every time, but I would probably say 50% of the time I'm emailing the appraiser at least the day before, and I will call them to confirm that they received that information.
And Shannon has very few appraisal issues once it goes under contract because she has that relationship with the appraiser in part, is conveying that information. So it probably takes her an extra 15 or 30 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
But definitely way less headaches down the road.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
When it comes to pools, right, let's say one in the 10 households have a pool. This person put in a lot of money. He said it had 70,000. That does not translate into the value going up because it's 10 years old. It's got a lot of maintenance. So how do you really appraise that?
So yeah, the condition of the pool is huge because I've had a house that was in the 300,000 range and they had a pool that's falling apart, and somebody that might want to keep their payments low, their daily living costs low, then they're looking at this as, this is a detriment, this is not going to help me, and nobody wanted that pool. I have one in TK right now. It's in the older part of TK. Nobody has an in-ground pool. They spent $150,000 on this pool, and they thought that they were going to get that. I will tell you, they probably got about $30,000 for that pool at the end of the day. So it's really looking at, I mean, I will go further out to try to find that comparable. So I went into Fort Mill to see, okay, a little bit over the border, were there pools, what did that appraise for, things like that. But yeah, you do have to consider the condition. And when you're listing a pool, people want to know what the liner type is it salt water, is it heated? That adds value, but it's kind of like that, it depends. We went over this. So did my comps reduce price prior to going under contract? How many times? I'll start out if it's in a subdivision. I'm going to start out looking at what's going on in that subdivision. I'm going to bracket it. I'm going to look at a 2-story house to a 2-story house. I'm going to get a feel for that. Then I'm going to go outside the neighborhood, 1 to 2 miles, and see, is there a new build community being built that I need to consider? If I price my house at this, is there a brand new house a mile down the road that is going to be priced less than mine and also giving interest rate reduction and concessions and things like that? I think that we're all dealing with that right now is a huge challenge, and it's a big conversation with the clients because you're competing with an enticing offer with a new build, and you're getting all new things with a warranty versus a resale home. No comps within the same neighborhood. I'm minimally 1 mile out, 2 mile out. If it's rural, I'm going 5 miles out. I'm trying to stay within the same county is what my goal is. And then Mike went over the SAMS report. So sometimes I'll look at it if I have no idea what to price it at and I'm not really sure about the area. I'm going to look at the appreciation. So if they bought this house in 2018, you can go ahead and, let me see if I pop to this. So let's just say Fort Mill. So you could just put in Fort Mill. You could just put in a subdivision if you want. But let's say, so you could go here and do last 10 years. So let's say this property closed in July of 2015 in Fort Mill, and now Fort Mill is at $490 for a median close price, and before it was $246. You do the math to get that appreciation. How much did it appreciate within that time? Take the original sale price and apply that appreciation. It doesn't work all the time, but it gives you another factor to look at too if you're really, really at a loss. The other thing that somebody was asking about was bracketing when you're pricing. Think about when somebody's looking on Zillow. Everybody's looking at Zillow, or an agent is setting them up. Is an agent going to set you up at a price up to $299? No, they're going to start you at $300 and go up. So now you just lost out. If you're pricing it at $299, you just lost out on all of your buyers that are looking below that number. Same with Zillow. They're usually $50,000 increments. So by you pricing, and this is our philosophy, some people do the $299 thing, but I think that you're losing out on a whole buyer pool if you're doing odd numbers, especially with the way that people are searching right now. There's another tool in Showing Time. So if you go to Showing Time and go to reports, there is a target market analysis. And this is really cool and just another aspect to look at, but you can look at last 30 days. You could do a subdivision. So let's say Mike said Waterside. Waterside. Okay, so then you could, so let's say if you're like, okay, I'm between $400,000 and $500,000 for this house. I really don't know. Like, do we go at 450? Do we go at where do we go? So minimum price range, I'm going to put 400,000. Max, I'm going to put 500,000. You can adjust your increments. So I want to see how many showings by price point those houses in Waterside have had. And you could go down here. Let me just put 4 mil just for ease. So this is the last 30 days in Fort Mill between 400 and 500,000 in an increment of 5,000. This shows you total showings by price point, weekly average that they're getting. So this is where Mike and I are like, oh, during COVID, we would say if you didn't have 10 to 15 showings a week, you're not priced right. Well, we're in a different market. So here you could see, okay, the weekly average is about 3. So then you could go to your sellers and say, if we're not getting 3 showings a week, you're off somewhere. And then it shows you how many showings per listing. So you could say, all right, well, this 485 price range is looking pretty good because they've gotten an average of 6 showings, where other price points only got 2 showings. Take it with a grain of salt because there might be a smaller sample set and you're looking at one really great house priced at one price point. But it's just another factor that you can look at, not just looking at at the CMA. Any questions yet?
So you mentioned.
Where did you go again in showing time? Can you make it bigger? Make it. I don't know if I can. Control plus. Like that? You up the chart bigger? Or
No.
where you go in showing time?
Where did you collect it from in showing time?
Okay, so when you go into showing time on that left panel, you're gonna go to reports. And then all the way at the very bottom is target market analysis.
Thanks.
And there's other really cool reports, like the listing activity report. If you don't have a single thing to tell your seller about why it's not moving, you could show them this. There's another cool one, and I know this doesn't go along with the CMA training, but in resources in MLS, there's something called list track. You could actually go to all of your listings in there. So say I wanted to see how my listing was comparing to another property. You could do view analytics. It's gonna say, do you wanna manage similar homes? So do I wanna compare it to similar homes and what's going on with other properties that are near me? And I click there. I just do auto select. So it's gonna give you just a range within a mile, within 30% of the square footage. Easy enough just to give your seller some type of information. So this is gonna come tell me how many views have I had on that property. It's gonna show me the views for my property versus the views for similar properties. So you could tell them, hey, we're really off base, or we're right in line with everybody else. On Zillow, we're getting 800 views. Average homes are getting 800 views. We're just kind of in line with what everybody else is seeing, or we're not getting any views and all these other properties got significant views. So just another avenue that if you're banging your head against a wall and talking about a price reduction, some people are visual and they need to see these things.
You mentioned 2-story versus like a ranch versus 2-story. What do you deduct between both of them?
So yes, when I'm going in, and I'll go into this one too and just walk you through a quick CMA. But what I'm going into, so what I do first is I pull up the previous MLS sheet if there is one. I'm going to use that. I've got all the information. It's a 1-story, 843 square feet. I'm going to pull up a new residential search. And this is what my starting point is going to be. So I'm going to click under contracts, close. It defaults to 6 months. I'm going to start with looking in the same subdivision. So this is Old Town subdivision. I'm going to type in Old Town. I'm not going to filter on anything other than that. I'm just going to see what is going on in this neighborhood. Are there a million things listed? Do we not have any competition at all? So right now, what I'm looking at is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So everything that is on the market is a 2-bed, 2-bath. The only thing that has closed is 3 bedrooms. So the 3 bedrooms we're closing out at, let's say, 230,000. The two bedrooms are sitting there overpriced, some of them, and some of them have reduced. Then what I want to see is if I go half mile out from my property, I'm going to take out my subdivision. Go a half mile out. And I'm going to go to the type, and I'm going to go to townhouse because I only care about the townhouses. Let's say let's go out a mile just to see what's going on in the neighborhood. So again, within a mile of that property, there's 5 that are on the market that we have to compete with, which is quite a bit. So now we have to take into account we've got competition. So if we want to price it high, does that really make sense? Because we have 5 other ones that have been sitting there. No, it doesn't make sense. So then I'm going to go back. And I'm going to go back to Old Town. And since I have no 2 bedrooms to compare it to, I clear my map there. I'm going to go out 8 months in the same subdivision. And I'm going to see, okay, now we've got some 2 bedrooms. My square footage is 843. All of these closed out. 2 bedrooms, 1 story. Hit my quick CMA. All right, so now I'm looking at the dates. When did these go on the market? Really during a tough time. So keeping a pulse on the market is extremely important to know what was going on with interest rates, what was going on with the government, yada yada. So these were all July, August. It was a challenging month. However, I'm looking at, days on market wasn't too bad. I'm looking down here at the median, 252 a square foot, took 21 days. They sold at a median of 218. I'm gonna go back to all these that are sitting here. This one's listed at 238, you're too high. I'm gonna click on this little timer up here. So they listed on March 6th. They didn't reduce, they just listed recently. I'm gonna look at my other ones. This one's listed at 234.9. So they reduced. They started at 241, too high. They're pricing it against a 3-bedroom house. So we're gonna kind of go through the process of that and get a really good feel for why did those not sell. I'm gonna actually pencil that in. I'm gonna keep, when I'm doing my quick CMA, I'm not just going to bring the closed comps. I'm gonna throw in there everything that is listed in there right now. And I'm also gonna pencil in next to it, did they take a price drop? And then if you are going, if there's a lot to choose from 2 miles out, print that out too, so you can show them, this is what's going on in this neighborhood, but if I'm going a mile out, these are all the things that we have to compete with as well, because they're looking in that same space. Your question about the 1 story, in a standard, if I'm just looking at a standard subdivision, I'm only gonna compare a 1 story to 1 story. If I'm struggling to find it, sometimes I'll throw in a 1.5 story, because your main living and bedrooms are still typically on that main floor. You're also typically gonna get a higher price per square foot for a 1 story versus a 2 story. Same thing with basements. People tend to price basements too high because they're including that same square footage as the basement. You have to factor that in. You're not gonna get that. The higher the price per square foot, or the higher the square footage of the house, usually the lower price per square foot. So we get to see that people, well, the price per square foot sold for $200 for this house. Well, that house was 1,100 square feet. Yours is 2,500 square feet. It's not relative. I'm trying to think of what else. Everybody knows that they changed the pool, where that's found. So you have to actually go into pool features now. I was having a challenge with that because it changed in MLS. So sometimes if you're looking at further out than 6 months, they didn't have that feature. So sometimes you actually have to type in remarks with like a pool. So you're not losing anything that didn't fall through the cracks with that change. In remarks, you can type in anything. If you want to type in barn, if you want to type in anything, that'll pop up just so you're not missing anything.
One question.
Yeah.
To basements. Let's say we have a same example where 1,000 square feet above grade. Let's say they have 900 below grade. If you put, let's say $150 or $220 for above grade, the below grade is going to be at least, let's say 1/3 or at least half of what above grade is, right?
That's typical. So the question is, if you're one price per square foot for the above grade, are you just still taking a quarter of that or half of that for below grade? It does depend. If it's a basement, is it a split level where, like, yes, maybe a part of that is below grade, but you do have 2 bedrooms and a bathroom down there? A lot of the times, if you can't find a split level, I'm comparing it to a 2-story. But yes, I'm typically, if it's true basement, I'm typically not giving it a 1-for-1 for the main living area. And it is easiest to find, even if you have to go out of the neighborhood to find a true basement, it is really best to try to find that to see how they were pricing that price per square foot for the total square footage wise. There's a ton of different nuances. Honestly, and like I said, it's intuition and it's based on doing it over and over and over again and figuring out what an appraiser is going to say, knowing what the pushback of a seller is going to be, and really having that ammunition of different reports and different strategies to prove why you're pricing it this way. But that's pretty much it. And like I said, if you guys have questions and you want me to take a look at something or Mike to look at something, we're happy to do it. If you did not get this flyer, because I don't think that we passed out enough, I think we'll get with the Market Center. We can email it out, and our phone numbers are at the bottom. We can send you our email information. But that's basically it. Any other questions about the one-offs? I know that's really what we have the challenge with. Or like, what if I have a equestrian property and things like that?
What about location? I had a big challenge with location one, and it didn't seem like it was, but then it turned out to be apparently a big one. But
Location as far as like
as far as like it backs up to like Cameron Wood, are you familiar?
Yes.
Backs up to Park Road, but there's a berm there, and
So those are the nuances that are the biggest challenge. So backing up to a main road, having the electrical, what do they call them? The cell phone towers behind you. It's either going to bother a buyer or it's not, and there's not a dollar amount that you can really put on it. Do you know that you're probably going to get pushed back on it and devalue it a little bit? Yeah. And I know Mike said you don't always account for that backyard, but you just know that in general, more people are going to not want to be by that or near that versus not. So I would adjust to be below what those comps are showing, just to know that I've sold many that have a cell phone tower or whatever. What is cell phone tower, electrical tower, power lines, whatever they are. And they will. There's going to be people that are like, no, it doesn't bother me, or they will. And that's the hardest part. A smoker house, how do you price that? It's either going to bother the person or not. You're going to know that you're going to have to take a drop for it. But it's going to take longer to be on the market until that right buyer comes along too. I do look at if it's on a main road, I'll go back up to 3 years to see if I can find another one that sold on that same road or back to that same road to see where that value was in comparison.
So what about high school? I've got one that's going to be backing up to a high school football.
I think the most important thing is that you have a clear conversation with your sellers that like we're reducing our buyer pool to 30% or whatever. 70% of people don't want to be back to power lines. Don't want to be back to Friday Night Lights or whatever that is. But for some buyers, they just don't care. Like I just built a house and there are train tracks like directly across the street from me. But like my grandmother lived close to train tracks and I think it's kind of cool. So it's a non-issue for me. But I know when it comes time for resale, there's going to be people who don't want to hear a train go by 4 times a day. So you just have to have that conversation up front and let the market tell us what's going on with the price.
Yeah, and again, look at if there was another house similar in that area that sold, even if it was 5 years ago, take a look at it to see where that sold in comparison to other values. Because I have had one that backed up to a high school and the people were like, oh, we love to hear the band at night. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, it depends. But it is likely going to take longer days on market. probably not gonna get that same value because you're just, like, your buyer pool just dwindles a little bit.
Scott. So I know for me, like running comps, you have that number, but to get a house sold right now, to me, it's a little bit different. So what do you guys, what's your conversation, what's your script, so to speak? Hey, here's what the comp says, but to get this house sold in the shortest amount of time, this house more, that's money. What is that usually? Where are you falling out on the comps that you run versus where you're selling? Are you at it or below?
Yeah, so when I'm talking to my sellers, I say there are some agents that are going to come in and try and price at the highest price we can possibly get for that home. I said, I prefer to price it a little bit on the lower end, try and get multiple offers, try and get people emotionally invested in the home, and then they're willing to pay a little bit more. They're willing to overlook some more things. So if you can get your clients to buy into that, I think that's the better way to go about it, and let the market tell us what the price is.
And I'm giving them, we do a net sheet, I'm giving them 3 scenarios. And I'm never gonna give them the very, very highest that I don't ever wanna price it at. And then we're gonna talk about those scenarios. This is what market is demanding right now. This will probably give you those average days on market. You go a little bit lower, you're a little bit more likely to get more offers. If you go to this high side, we could try it, but let's have that conversation of in 2 weeks, we're gonna drop that price. And the conversation is, in this market, it's trickier than ever to crawl out of a hole when you're overpricing the property. During COVID, we would say, sky's the limit, list it at whatever, we'll drop it, you're gonna get the same amount of traffic. Even if you drop within 2 weeks, it's so hard to regain that traffic right now, and it becomes a stale listing, and nobody wants to hear that their house is a stale listing. So that's really the conversation that I'm having. Because it's really hard, I mean, to get the marketing back out and to get people's eyes back on it, especially with more inventory coming up and fresh inventory, the likelihood of them coming back to your house after you reduced it is very low.
So what you told primarily was probably for a listing agent, when you go on the buyer side, right? When you were meeting a buyer for the first time. I mean, for me as a realtor, I spend most of my time on CMAs. That's my most time where it goes. But from what you have different approach where you do a full CMA, do a quick CMA, right? Like which one is more of when I go see a buyer? If I do a quick CMA, just give them a report, and this is what I really think it is worth. How do you approach that exact? They're looking for, okay, like what should I offer this home? Like, let's say the listing price 500K. Can we offer 430? I mean 450 or 440? What do you tell the buyer in terms of comps, quick CMA versus detailed CMA?
So both. If we're just walking through the house, before I go and show homes in the neighborhood, I'll pull a quick CMA. Right. So I can say, here's what the highest price is sold at, here's what the lowest says, here's the average, here's the median, and we can just have that conversation. If we get to the point where we're making an offer, I like to do a full CMA, just so I can better advise it.
Make that make sense.
Yeah, I mean, and all of these things pertain to buyers too. Looking outside of how many things are they gonna have to compete with, thinking about that resale. If it's been on the market for 100 days because there's an issue with the backyard and it backs to a cemetery, listen, you might love this price, but the issue that they're having now is gonna be your issue when you resell too. So thinking long-term as well. Also factoring in those seller concessions. Hey, yeah, that's great that they sold for 220, but is that neighborhood giving $5,000 in concessions? Maybe we use that. Maybe we take it off the purchase price of the house. Right. So, but yeah, it depends. I think it depends on what your style is. Mine is the quick CMA. Obviously, the more detailed, the better. In some scenarios with some clients, sometimes it's information overload, and they just want you to tell them 3 numbers. So you're just gonna have to figure out what your client's personality is.
Do you run a CMA for new builds? It's harder, like if you're taking a client for a new build for a block, and you do listing, do you do the CMA for the surrounding area?
Not typically for new builds. I mean, if this is the neighborhood you want to be in, these are the amenities you want, the builder you want, this is what the price is. I mean, we have a little bit of negotiating there, so you can look and see if anybody else has gotten some deals, and just use that as a negotiating tool. But no, I'm typically not doing a CMA for new home.
No, I see that you are a listing agent. I'm more of a buyer's agent. When it comes to asking seller concessions, let's see the effective replacement, right? We are looking at $10,000 in full cost. do you think it's better to go 10,000 off the asking price or 10,000 in concessions? What do you prefer?
Well, look, I mean, it depends on the buyer and what their goal is. Do they not have a ton of cash that they need towards their closing costs, or do they want a lower, do they want the lower list price? And what I'm looking at is, if you, let's say you want $10,000 in closing costs, my concern is my seller's net. So can we overprice the house a little bit? So let's say it's a $200,000 house, you're asking for $10,000 in closing costs. Can we agree to 205 and keep the 10, so we're only netting $5,000 less? Or do we have a concern with the appraisal? So to the seller standpoint, it doesn't matter. It's all the same to a seller. They're looking at that net proceeds. It does not matter to them unless we think that we're gonna have an appraisal issue.
Thank you guys.